My special guest today, Mayookh Barua. Welcome, Mayookh.
Hi, Bill. How's it going?
Good, really good. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. It's been how long? 2 years,
At
1 year.
least a couple of years. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you finished out the year in North Carolina and then you went on a whole new adventure that we're going to learn about today. So,
Yes, yes. I graduated with my master's in fine arts from NC State in fiction, and in May of 2023, so last year. And then I'm doing a PhD in creative writing and literature here at University of Southern California in nonfiction.
in nonfiction,
Yes,
wow, that's an
yes.
interesting shift.
I know, and we should get into it.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Let's go back to the very beginning first and tell us where you're from and the
Yeah.
origins and and what inspired you also to work up to this point in your life? Was there something there in childhood that were you a big
Um,
reader, big writer, whatever it was?
yeah, I have a great story about this because I wasn't a big, I'm not a big reader or writer, but like it's interesting. I always think of what's a big reader and a big writer. Who is that person? And but I was very aware of hierarchies, I think, when I was growing up. And I think I always wanted to be, as a child, you always want more affection, even if you get a lot of affection. I grew up a lot of affection, like a lot of adulation. I'm like one of the, I forgot the first question, which was I'm from Guwahati. I was born and brought up in Guwahati, which is a city in the northeast part of India in the state called Assam. And so I think for 15 years I was in Guwahati. And then for a medical reason, I was moved to Delhi, which is a national capital. And then my dad said, why don't you just give some entrance exams? Because in India, you have to do like, there's some entrance exams to do the 11th and 12th in a different school. So I gave, there was this competitive school my dad really wanted me to get into. And he was like, oh, it'll be great if you get into this school. And I was like, I'm not going to get in because I had all these other smart friends who had applied, and I was like, I'm never gonna defeat them. And it's so funny, like I did get through and they didn't. You know, I'm kind of how should I say? I'm complimenting myself here, but I'm not being
It's
very.
okay.
But having said that, I think I was very surprised actually because oh my God, I'll be doing a part of my education in the capital. And so my education has been like I've really been jumping across cities, I feel, for my like quote unquote in education, which is interesting is because the book project that I have at my PhD is called Miseducation of a Sissy. Um, and it's about education, but we'll get into that later. And so my journey with writing is that in short, I would say capitalism is the start of this journey. In that, like, whenever I went to a store in Assam, I always wanted to buy something, you know. And um, I went to a store. I would buy small knickknacks, and my mom and dad were like, "We have no space for more showpieces. Like, you need to stop buying." Then I realized they would not stop me from buying books. So I started buying books, and books were not that expensive, like a knickknack was like a showpiece was expensive and would just sit there. And I was like, okay, or a toy, and I would get bored of a toy. But then like I started like, okay, I could buy a book. It's still a thing, it's still a thing, and I can still possess it and I can still keep it. It's still a decorative item. But so I started buying, and my mom and dad would never question me. I would like go to store and be like, "Oh, I need this," and they would like, "Okay, fine, it's a book."
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and then eventually what happened, I filled an entire shelf, and my mom was like, "Well, you can't buy more books now because you haven't read a single one of them." And then I was like, "Okay, now I have to read them in order to buy another book." So I
You
was
just
like,
wanted to have them, possess
yeah, I
the.
just wanted to have them. I truly
Okay.
just wanted to possess books, and that was the fantasy. And then like I then I started reading the book and I was like, okay, this is interesting. I like it. You know, this is not a bad experience. And so like I get to both read it, but and then when I'm done with it, I get to buy a book. So I think that was like a great capitalistic turn into my education, where I think like purchasing books and like made me realize, oh, this is an exciting thing. You know, it's making a. I remember reading like I forgot the name of the series, but it was like a children's book about like sharks and dinosaurs, and it was like going into a different world. And there was Junne B. Jones, and there was Jigsaw Jones used to solve mysteries and stuff. And there was this Jackie Chan kind of, kind of his action books or something. So, and then those were like, when I was 9, 10, and my dad, I remember when I was really young, um, got me this really two fat books. One was the Big Book of Experiments, and the other one was Children's Encyclopedia. And I was like obsessed with the images, and I didn't know how to read fully then. At when I was obviously like 6 and stuff, full sentences I couldn't read, obviously. But because I would just stare at it, stare at it, stare at it, eventually like somehow like you're going to school and you're coming back and staring at the text, you kind of try have a curiosity to figure out, and then you figure it out. And I think that kind of like almost like intimate relationship to a thing like a book or a text, I think drew me to it. And very funnily enough, um I also come from a culture that is heavily reliant on oral like tradition. Like my mom, to make me sleep, she would tell me a story. Or if I was, being too bored or cranky, my grandmother would tell me a story. And I really enjoyed that. So storytelling and reading was an inert part of the culture, but I never imagined myself as a writer, or like writing could be a pursuit. If you tell an Indian family that I'm going to be a writer, they would really ask you to have a life, get a life or something, because it's just, you become an engineer, a lawyer, a doctor, and,
Oh yeah,
something
yeah.
that has, credibility,
Okay.
which I would challenge at this point in time. But at the same time, at the point of, I was like, yeah, I want to be something that has money, decent money. I want to have a roof over my head. And I never thought about writing or literature as a pursuit, or or one could even like have an engaged life with literature. It was not something. I thought it was like gardening. It's just a hobby, You just do it on the side,
Mm.
and you have other things that you do. And then I graduated like my 12th, my school, and then I went to Ashoka University, and it was like one of the best experiences for me, because it like really pushed us, especially our cohort, to like be uncomfortable, and how the discomfort can and does generate learning. So like learning how to be in discomfort is very important. And so I think even if like people were not in like maybe political science or English majors, even if they were computer science majors, they were still challenged to think about social issues and stuff. So I was in that kind of an environment where like thinking about the world around me became important. It became an activity that everyone participated in. So at the point of time, I was doing economics. I was trying to major in economics, and then but what happened was that I was going through a really difficult personal time, because I think I was coming to terms with my queerness, or I think I'm gay. I just don't know what I'm feeling. I think I have a lot of antagonism against myself. I was going to therapy, and I just realized I was in a microeconomic class. I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I optimizing? Why am I solving these equations? Like I have so many issues in my life, like that I feel like are drowning me, and I don't know if this is what I should be doing. For some people it works, it becomes a distraction, but for me I really was like, oh, I need to learn more about what I'm going through. I need language, I need art, I need something to like make me more aware about what I'm feeling, even if it's like sadness, even if it's like growth or whatever it is. And so therapy was helping me, but then I realized that I think I need to, and it was in my, like, literally in my second year of college, when I was sophomore, when like you couldn't change your majors. I went to the English department HOD, who eventually became my thesis advisor. um, like, look, I think I want to do literature. And she was like, wait a second, like, you're really late in the game, you know, like, people have already like signed up for the majors, they've done 2 3 courses, you know, they're filling up their credits, and you know, you have no literature course um, on your transcript. And I was like, no, no, I will work hard, I will do whatever it takes. And she was like, it'll take you 5 courses a semester, like, to graduate. And I was like, I'll take it, because I was so desperate to like get out of a space which distanced me from my feelings. Like, I really wanted to think more about why I was feeling what I was feeling, you know, around my queerness, or my relationship with my family, or my relationship with my tradition, relationship with my national identity, my heritage, my femininity. There's so many questions that I just, like, I couldn't sleep with all those questions, you know. And the reason why I chose literature was because, or English, to major in English, you know, I could have chosen anything else, right? Why that? Is because I remember I had like a strange kind of a depressive phase right before coming to college. And because I was a bit heavy set, and I think I also was applying to the US to come for my undergrad, but for a different reason I couldn't. And I think because I was very heartbroken from that, like, I really wanted to come to the US with a scholarship, and I couldn't get the funding, I couldn't get the support. I really took it hard on myself, and I got into this depressive phase. And what brought me out of that was a novel. And it was particularly, yeah, actually, like, and I'll tell you why it got me out. I was reading Museum of Innocence by Orhan Pamuk. And it's not like the most, it's actually like a book about a cousin falling in love with another cousin. It's not like it's all revelatory book about life. It was like a romance. It was like a 600-page book.
Oh,
And um, I was not able to read a sentence. Like, I was struggling to read a sentence because all the thoughts in my head were distracting me. All the negative thoughts in my head were distracting me. And I was realizing that reading is this process wherein you have to let go of the world and enter a different kind of world, you know, like, get into the language and move into the world that is in front of you. And I'm not saying I got out of it fully, but I realized, oh, I'm struggling because I am in a, like, a depressive phase, because I'm angry, I'm agitated, I get upset at everything. You know, I'm cranky. I'm cranky, but I'm also not hungry. I don't want to eat, and like, I constantly want to sleep. So I knew that something was wrong. And the books were the only. I didn't want to talk to anybody, so the books were the only thing I wanted to interact with. And music, like, I was listening to a lot of um, like, I was doing different kinds of music, like metal or like classical music. I was just listening to different kinds of music, and like, I realized that, like, what it's doing to me is taking away my focus. And I need to be able to focus. Maybe I'll come back to the present. And I'm just in this kind of sad state because I'm not present. You know, I'm going back. And I think in The Body Keeps a Score, it's a book, you know, by Bessel von Klock, I think, Kolk, I've forgotten his name. He says, you know, like, PTSD patients feel that they're stuck in the past, like, they're not able to realize that the past, or they don't know the separation. So I'm not saying, like, you know, I'm a PTSD patient, but what I'm trying to say is that I do think not being able to move out of the past is a certain kind of condition and can affect our psychological state. So when I was in Ashoka, I realized entering a similar state. I'm entering a similar kind of um, unable to concentrate. I'm unable to focus. You know, not feeling motivated about life and stuff. And I knew, okay, I need to pursue books in the classroom as well. Like, I can't do it in my free time because I don't have free time. So that's why I shifted to literature. And it was hard. I didn't do well, you know. I was the back bencher. I was the, like, I had really bad GPA. I was not meeting my deadlines. My professors were really kind to me whenever they were. That is, not always, but like, no, I really met like, like when you're going through a difficult time, you need to be kind to yourself, but others also have an opportunity to extend their kindness, and you get to see the kindness, because you don't get to see it otherwise, when everything's great. So I really met amazingly kind people during that really difficult time, the kind of 3, 4 semesters when I was just like, okay, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I need to do this for myself. I need to get out of this state. And I mean, I graduated, and the funny joke about me was that, like, I didn't think I would graduate, and then the day of the graduation, I was like, I'm not gonna graduate. And I was like, I didn't buy any of the graduation gear and stuff. And my friends were like, your name was called on the graduate, like in the practice. And I was like, what? I'm not supposed to graduate. Like, I still haven't submitted my papers yet. And they were like, no, no, your name is there. I was like, oh. And they're like, you should come.
Wow.
You should come if it's on the roll. And I
How
was
did
like,
that happen?
how did
Yeah.
that happen? I still don't know. Actually, I realized that so they make you graduate if you pass. So you get the credits if you pass. So the professors, even if you might be submitting, even if you don't know the real grade, they will still say, oh, this person is passing. So they will still get the credit. So you still have the credit. I didn't know that. I thought you get a grade only then you get to graduate. So and then the thing was, like, I was in the departmental graduation, and after it ended, like before the big one, and then before it ended, I went to my professor. I was like, Professor, please, could you give me an extension? And my professor was like, Mayookh, this is graduation. Why are you asking me for an extension? It was like, I was so desperate. I was like, I'm so desperate. And he was like, fine, just take 1 or 2 days. And so you can really see, like, I wasn't having like this gala time, with the shift. But I knew that, like, it was really helping me think. I was introduced to literary theory. I was introduced to different kinds of books, which I really go back to again and again now as a PhD student. And it kind of like threw me into the deep end almost of writing and reading and processing information. Um, um, like my personal and political as being intertwined. What I was going through was not just like a thing that happened, but it was like it's coming from a context. It's from the fact that, like, I see homophobia where I grew up, or I saw like there was a rejection from my femininity, that I was having all of these feelings. And a lot of people come to this kind of realization through different ways. I came through it through my literature classes. So I was really indebted to it. And the hesitation I had with literature classes was like, oh, I'm never going to get a job. That's the thing that I'm never going to find a job. It's funnily enough, I was hired. I was one of the first people to be hired from my cohort, actually. Um, and um, and I give all the credit to being a literature major, because it made me realize that, you know, I don't have all these kind of fancy um, skills like Python or like, Excel or whatever. I think Excel is still fancy, but I still have that ability to like think and contribute, because I was constantly doing that in 5 classes each semester. I was forced to be even if I was uncomfortable, even if I was sick, even if I was couldn't think of a smart point, I still had to say something. And I think that really developed a skill that I employed in the interview that eventually I was hired for. So, and I was hired, and I never thought about writing as a thing, and I had a really low GPA. So I was like, I'm never gonna get to grad school. One of my
Was this also your second language?
is my second language. English is my second language. My mother tongue is Assamese.
Okay.
So
I think a lot of people would be surprised that there's even an English department in another country, right? Right. I mean, even though English is widely read and spoken in India too, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. India is a former British colony,
Mm.
and the English is the administrative language. So it is the language. It's one of the administrative, not the only. Hindi is the other administrative language. And but that there are political issues around that. But like, having said that, I mean, English is there all the time. It is that kind of the language of um, social mobility in countries that were former colonies, because it spoke to a certain kind of access to power. So I think I had a very rigorous training towards to learning English, and it wasn't just like something that happened in university. It was a training that was there from a very young age. My mom was like, "You can't speak in your mother tongue; speak only in English,"
Wow.
and which is very fascinating. I'm thinking about these things in my project actually, and it creates a lot of tension. Like learning. The tension that I'm talking about is that I come from an Assamese culture, and culture is language is a part of that culture. The way you interact with people is a part of the culture, and the books you're reading in English represent English, the culture of an Anglophonic world. And what's interesting about the world that we live in is like the idea of Anglophone being Anglophonic is expanding, right? It's like it's bringing in China or India, all those kind of spaces where English is also a dominant language besides the language that they have there, which was not the case when I was growing up. So you were like learning the culture of a different world. I was also learning French there. So it was almost like learning French. You're learning how to be a French person by learning the language. But since there is a history of colonization, English is in that territory of being both that kind of cultural emblem of social mobility in that colonial world, but also kind of delineates you from your own cultural roots sometimes. So I think that's a struggle as well, and I still, I'm still thinking through those things. It's not like um, it's much more complicated than it feels on the surface.
But
Uh,
the language itself wasn't why your GPA was lower. It was more of your personal struggle.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, honestly, Bill, my English is not that great. That's I have to say that because like all my advisors and even now people are like, babe, your grammar is not good. And I'm like, it isn't. It truly isn't. So a lot of my training, when I was young, my mom and dad, I could there was this whole thing, you need to learn English. English is the language of mobility, and I was to be I would watch this Australian show called High Five or something, and actually that show taught me how to. I might be butchering the show's name, I forgot actually, but it was like an Australian show. It'll come at like 7 o'clock, and they would teach you like repeat with me, the English words, and they also taught me how to tie shoelaces. So they did a lot of things, and then like I learned English and like my enunciation and my pronunciation came from that. It didn't come from reading necessarily. As I told you, like reading was something that I came to like gradually. It wasn't like a thing that was like, some people it's just a thing. Yes, this is what I love and like, but for me it was like a really gradual process. And I do struggle with um I do struggle with sentences. A lot of my feedback in both my MFA and my PhD is like, oh, these sentences are clunky. These are like grammatically strange. They don't make sense. And that is a lot of feedback that actually people whose second language is English get, because they're not used to certain kinds of English. They're used to different language and different way of speaking English. Like in the Caribbean, the English is like they have their own way of, they've incorporated English in different ways because it's such a melting pot there, and it's not just one culture, different cultures. So in a similar way, and I over time I've become like, okay, like the critique of grammar is both valid and superficial at the same time, because I think um like the content is what I'm trying to, like the feeling, the plot, the emotion is what I'm trying to share. And so the struggle with the GPA was partly because English is my second language. It's not something I'm totally like absolutely fluent in, and I'm getting a training in it, and a very rigorous, quick, intense training in it. But also it was amplified by the personal complications I had. So I think that's the reason why it was really it wasn't like absolutely like the worst thing on this planet, but trust me, it would have been like worse. So
Well,
I'm glad.
we were talking earlier about pronunciation of names. I'm a international business coach, and I see lots of people from 20 over 25 countries, all different cultures, different languages, different jobs. And I have a few people from India, actually. I've had through the years, I've had a couple of others. Sometimes, sometimes they don't have any problem at all. But then sometimes when they have an accent problem, it's really, really difficult. And it's like they know the words, but the speech is just so difficult because the accent is so thick. It's one of the most challenging uh, probably countries to deal with. I don't want to say language because there's many languages from there. So, but and it could be the region where they're from. That could be. I've never zeroed in on that factor, but so for me, like pronouncing a lot of these names has always been a challenge. I think some of it goes back to my childhood when I had a speech impediment. I struggled to speak English just to speak. And the crazy part is now I am an English professor. I write, I speak all day, and I interview people, and that's kind of strange how that comes around like that.
No, I mean, I think I guess the world should know that I'm like an astrology buff, like a lot of people in my generation. And like when you struggle with life, things that provide you a certain kind of mystified knowledge of the world. That's how I like to put it. But it's not concrete, it's not scientific, you can't verify it in a way, but it still gives you a certain way of looking at the world, like really comes to the fore. So a lot of there were articles written about during pandemic how astrology took a boom. People were really into predicting the future because there was so much unpredictability, and like the evidence, like scientific evidence of like, or like the numbers were like not motivating people. You needed something that was a bit almost vague, because predictions can be very vague. And one of the things that they say is like the purpose in your life usually is always struggle that you have. Like what for me, it's not a contradiction that you are an English professor. In fact, it makes a lot of sense that you are someone who is working in the world of speech, because there were certain kinds of struggle you faced in that. So like overcoming it almost generates a certain kind of affection for it. I think that's another thing that people are sometimes scared of. What if we are in a relationship with someone we're struggling with, because when you struggle with something, you generate a certain kind of affection for it. And I used to teach this paper on, I forgot the name of the writers. They were like researchers from Harvard. They were, I think, um, anthropologists or something. I always forget names. And they were talking about how the thing about IKEA furniture is that people love IKEA furniture, they said, because they can make it, that they struggle with it, they figure it out, and that generates the love for it. So you could buy better and fancier furniture from, maybe at cheaper prices. I don't know, I don't have IKEA products, but what the paper did say is that that struggle generates certain kinds of intimacy. And I think that's important to know, that what we struggle with in many ways are things that we eventually work on and work with. That's a lot of the writing. Writing is, as a lot of writers would say, a very masochistic process. It's difficult, it's challenging, it really takes a lot of your time, energy for things you don't know why it's taking so much time and energy, but still there is something generative, powerful, um, relieving about it. So I don't want to just reduce it to masochism, but I do want to say that like um, things that we struggle with become like I struggled with, you know, just reading and grammar and all these kind of things over time. It looks like I didn't because of my subject position, just like yours, but it doesn't have that kind of the training I had around acquiring English, or like the difficulties of being in school in as an English major. All of these kind of have eventually contributed to um, my investment in it. Um, because also things that we love need not always be easy. Um,
True,
it
very
can give
true.
us challenges. Um, it can be challenging in many ways, and we can still love it. We can still cherish it. It can still give us a lot of growth. Um, yeah, but I
I've
know,
worked with a lot of young students through the years, and even the young college students, and I always see students who are, I say to myself, wow, they're so much further along than I was at that age. They're such a great writer. They're so much better than they might be better than I am now, and yet they're not focused on that. They're going to become an economist or an engineer or something else,
yes,
but that's, yeah, I mean, I struggle with that too as somebody who loves writing. I'm the author of 12 books, and like you said, I teach it, but I that's something I have always worked. I have to work at it. It's not that I was born with this. It was something I really, really had to work at and shape through effort, and I continue to do it. Every new book I read is a learning experience.
yeah. And this reminds me of a quote I think Arundhati Roy had said about like there is no value of an unbroken heart. Um, and I think I'm paraphrasing, but she was basically trying to say is that obviously like you need a variety of experiences in life, but you write from like you. I think people need to. Okay, this is like Kim Kardashian saying people don't work, but that's not what I'm intending to. What I'm trying to say is that like when you are trying to love something, there is always a risk that you'd be heartbroken. If you're trying to love a person, there is a risk that you'd be heartbroken. I think similarly, it is like, I think that's same as with labor and different kinds of engagements, that like there is always a risk, but I think you take that risk and you rise up to the challenge if you can. And if you don't, you just dust it off and move on. So I think that's why I think we're not looking for challenges as much as we're looking for how can we be better. And I think it that cannot happen without the challenge in place, as much as I don't want to romanticize struggle and difficulty, and like because systemic struggles are a real thing we should try to eradicate, but I think existentially we will always have issues, like life will always have reg- issues, we will all have something that we are struggling with, big or small. And it's both, it's ironical in many ways. The irony of life is that the things we struggle with are also things we, you know gain an expertise in, or like
Sure, sure
it's
thing.
out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Well, so you got through do they call it a bachelor's program? The
Yes, a
bachelor's
bachelor.
degree. So you got through that, and what happens? You get a job, and this is a writing job?
No, I'm actually, I love this. I got hired by like this online this beauty. It's like Sephora, but not Sephora, but it's online and it's in
Okay.
India. So and they were like, okay. And um, I really love skincare. I've really invested in skincare from a really young age. And so they were like, okay, this guy seems like he knows his ingredients. And I was like, I don't know my ingredients. And so I was there. I hated it. I was just like, oh, I hate this. It's just Excel sheets. And
Oh, okay. So it was a behind the scenes kind
it
of
was behind the
business.
scenes, yeah, and it
Okay.
was a startup, and I think the people were nice there and stuff, but it's just like the work was not. It was also during COVID, so
Oh, yeah.
I was working from home, and the interesting thing about working from home is that they make you work more, and because you don't get to do lunch breaks, they just like you're always on, you're working, so I was just like
Wow.
struggling with the work-life balance, and I wanted something. We all want something. We want something to work with. And I was like, what should I give myself as a challenge? Like I have the job. I didn't think I would get a job. I did get the job. What is the next challenge? So I was like, maybe I should try to go, um, like, what can I do with my degree? Obviously I can't become an economist now, or I can't do, I have to like figure out my life based on whatever choices I made so far. So I did an English literature degree, I took, I think, 4 classes in creative writing because I really was like, okay, I think I should dabble into creative writing a bit. Like, I'm not, because like English classes eventually became a lot about thinking about the text. And I think I was interested in how the text was generated. Like, how did this person come up with this? Instead of like thinking about the politics or the impact or like
The
what it means.
results, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was like not very, like I eventually stopped being invested in that. Invested. I'm still a literature student, you know. It's not like I'm not, but it's like I got curious about, okay, how does this work? Like, how did this novel thing come into like creation? And I wanted to go behind the scenes around that. So that's why I took the creative writing classes. So having like, I was like, oh, I have bad GPA. I I am creative right. I don't have a creative writing minor, but I one course less of a creative writing minor, and I have an English literature degree, and I'm working in a beauty firm. What could I do? And I was like, I think the only place that would accept me is an MFA program. This is a crazy thing to think about because a lot of people, because MFA programs are prestigious. But again, as I told my professors when I was asking them for recommendation, I am not looking to get accepted. I'm looking to just try. I'm looking to just shoot a shot. I'm looking to see what the application looks like. I have to write 3 stories. I have not written a full story till then. Like, I want to know what it means. I needed a goal, you know.
So for the application, you needed to write 3 full stories.
Yeah, it was like 30 to 45 pages. So like,
Wow.
and I was going through all these like um graduate school like behind the scenes kind of Facebook groups, and like they were like, you should give a diversity of stories, not one story, and all this kind of advice that are both good and bad. So I was like, oh, I need to write 3 stories. I've never written one. um and I took it as a challenge. I took it as like a thing that I wanted to do just for this, and I was like, I'm going to save up money from this work by staying at home, and I'm going to apply to places, and I'm going to do it. And I was like, I'm not gonna get in, like because it's so competitive. I'm never gonna get in, but I just want to give it a shot. I'm gonna try again the next year. That was my whole plan, you know. Like, what does it mean to ask for recommendation? What does it mean to do the SOP or for a creative writing thing? Like, I wanted to figure it out, you know, in the time when I was at home, just doing like menial work in a sense. And then I wrote these one, 3 stories. One of them even got published eventually, um, and I applied to like these 10 places, and I
10,
got called.
10?
Yeah, around 10 places I applied.
Wow.
And I think 2 of
All,
them were like
all in the US or
on the US because it was.
really? So you were determined to leave India and come to the United States.
Yeah, yes, in the sense that yes and no. In the sense, I'm saying yes because I was determined to leave um, the setting that I was in. I thought like my personal life, the way queer relationships were in India at that point of time for me, I was kind of struggling with it, like my intimate relationships and stuff. And there's always as someone from the East, there's always a certain kind of conception about the West being more open about it, and we can get to it eventually. But which is, I think, it's a farce. It's not always true. But
Sure.
like there is an imagination around like the West being open about these things. So held that imagination, like, and I think, but I don't think that was the reason why I applied to the US to the MFA programs. I think I wanted to prove that I could do a higher education, one more step of the higher education. Like I knew I wanted to get a master's. I just didn't know where. And I was like, I just need to get one because I think it's a personal goal. And I thought creative writing would be a good thing. And I knew I needed funding. And the only places that would fund were in the US. So it was like logistically, it made sense. It wasn't like something that I had like a deep attachment to. Eventually, I arrived, okay, this makes sense. Like that they would give me funding and that I would do something that I'm interested in. But in the back of my head, I was like, okay, I think I will be able to explore my what it means to be gay as well if I come to a place where like there certain kinds of stigmas don't exist. So all of these factors again, I think, played in to that decision. And again, I wasn't expecting to get in honestly. I wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna, yes, I applied, I'll get in. That was absolutely not the case. I was like, I'll get rejected. And when rejections were coming, because I had applied to the US once before,
Yeah,
during
yeah.
undergrad. And the reason why I was applying then was because in India, you get grade, you get your percentage, and then according to that, you have to choose your major. And I didn't like that. And Ashoka was that alternative for me where I wanted to choose a major. I wanted to be like, I want to do this because I like it. That's always been the thing that I want in my life. I want to do something because I have some kind of investment in it. And so I felt like the liberal arts education was the education for me. Like I didn't want to be pigeonholed because, I have a certain kind of percentage and that's the best I could do. Am I breaking?
A little bit, the video's a little off now. Yeah. Let's see if it,
Is it better now? Is it
it
better
might
now?
be, it might be okay now.
Okay, cool.
It's a little glitchy.
So,
Yeah, it's a little, I don't know.
okay, is it better now?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, I was saying that like I really wanted liberal arts education and I applied and I got through two schools, but again, like I got through Brown and UT Austin, but like the funding just didn't work out and it was really expensive and like it was just not possible. So I knew like again in the back of my head, I was like, okay, I need to go to another place. I was looking at places in Germany and like UK and like there were places I was looking at, but the funding was the thing that I really needed guaranteed this time because that was the reason I couldn't make it last time. So, and I again, the only places that fund for creative writing are in the US mostly. So that's how I navigated the application. There are a few in Canada and I think one or two in the UK, but like I think they have come up recently. Um, but till then, and also COVID changed a lot of things. I actually applied to a place and got in to a place in Italy. It was yeah, it was like one of my favorite authors, Alessandro Barrico. It's his school of creative writing.
Wow.
And I was like, how will I go to Italy without any? And people were, the admissions committee was like, it's kind of cheap, to live here. And I was like, yeah, but the tuition is expensive, girl. So, but I wanted like those, I did, again, like I did get accepted and I realized, no, I need a full funding. I need like my stipend covered. And so I think that eventually pulled that decision around um, being applying to the US. And when Wilton called me, I was so shocked. That was the first call I got, and I think got it in February. I was I was ecstatic. It was just such a moment, and
So you
I
found
couldn't.
out via phone call.
Yeah, Wilton
Yeah.
called me, and I thought they don't call international students because just they don't. They would just email. And I was so surprised that he did the call and I
Wow.
was grateful for that. I got through like I was waitlisted one place, I got through another school. I got through UNLV, they made me an offer as well, University of Las what University of Nevada, Las Vegas.
Las Vegas.
And
Okay.
actually UNLV was paying me more money.
Oh,
But and NC State was actually like like I'm gonna say this because I have a redemption arc as well, but like it was in the bottom of my list. Like that was my like I also made a list, and this is a good advice to people who are going to graduate school. I would recommend not to apply to places that you don't want to go to. Like even if there is a bottom choice, like you should want to go there.
don't
Like I
bother applying just to apply.
Yeah, regardless of whether it's safety or not, you
Yeah.
should have an interest in going there. Because if that's the only school you'll get in, you should be happy about going there. So I think, but I knew that, like, I would be really happy to go to NC State, but it was at the bottom of my list. And then, like, I just felt like both Bell and Wilton were really interested in my work. And then I think I made this like I was thinking, is it money more important or like someone being able to learn and grow more important? And UNLV is a great program. It's one of like the more competitive top programs. But I think something about me, like, I was like, no, I think being in Raleigh like would be a nice place. I think after so much struggle, almost like challenges, emotional challenges, being in a place where I could like be a bit quiet as opposed to Las Vegas. I think I was like, I think I needed that. And it's one of the best decisions I've made in my life. Like
Oh,
I
good to hear. Yeah, Las
so
Vegas is a little chaotic, I think, right? It's
like yeah, no, just I love Raleigh, the people I've met and stayed, like professors, students, the students I taught, the people in my cohort. Like I love Raleigh. Like it's like I mean, and again, I'm very grateful to have an MFA experience that has been positive. It is not the case for a lot of people I've heard. But truly, 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 fundamentally, I think I have grown so much when I was in state and like learning from Bell, Cadwell, Wilton, Jill, Elaine, from you, like it's been great. I think, and I'm so glad I made the decision about the investment rather than just looking at the material. And it is a hard decision, and I'm not saying everyone should make the decision, but like should take a decision like money is a real thing. I don't think so you should sacrifice on money because you think there'll be fulfillment necessarily, but I think sometimes taking that risk could be important for your own growth, like understanding, because writing is not a profitable venture, and you need like there needs to be other ways of motivating oneself. And I think the community element is one of those things that I think really NC State like made me realize how important a community is for a writer to grow and learn and be present. And I'm forever grateful for that, and I wouldn't replace it for anything. And even after coming to State, I was like, oh, I should have probably gone to Las Vegas, but I think 1 year in, I was like, no, no, this is absolutely brilliant. Like
the
this
right
is
place, right time, right?
right place, right time, and being here in the PhD, like almost makes me realize how like I realized it. You know how you realize something after you see the good side of it, but I realized that before that. So I'm really grateful that I didn't have to get the PhD to realize how NC State was a great choice. Like that in itself was a great choice, and I learned it there. Um,
Had that been your first time in the United States?
yes, it
Wow.
is.
So you came right to Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yes, it was crazy, and I came during COVID. Like me
Yeah.
and
Oh, that strange time. Yeah.
I know. Uh, I was like talking to the director. Sorry, I was talking to Bell and stuff. Like, I probably won't be able to make it because they're not giving visas because of COVID. The COVID at the point of time during
Oh,
May.
yeah, yeah. That could have upended the whole thing, right?
Yeah, it was at the peak. It was like really high. Everyone was like, it was really bad, and like I think I write about it in one of the essays you know that was published about like how bad COVID was. It was just like you could hear 4 or 5 ambulances every day. It was like bonkers. Like death was everywhere. Like I think there was a time again, it's not like that's the only time that's happened, but like there was another time when like you could really see your mortality, like that like things could happen in a way that you just unexpectedly and you could lose things. And it was just scary and then unpredictable, and it was strange that I took the decision to come to US at the point of time where I was just like, I don't know, I'm a deep end kind of person. I'm like sometimes I think this, with like I learned swimming by being thrown, and then we were training and then we were just thrown one day into the pool and then we just learned. So I think that's really been my learning process. Like
Sometimes that's the best way. Jump right in.
yeah, and it's like you really need to, you don't have time to like think and overanalyze. You have to act. And I think when I was in the US, and I mean when I came here, I flew into Boston and then I flew into Raleigh. And I remember like um I didn't have a cell phone, or like I couldn't connect with my roommate even though like I had a roommate then. Like I made a roommate before coming to the US and stuff. And I was like, I don't know how I'll get in. So I had to like order one like a cab, like a $65 cab. And I had like it was like an SUV. It was like this special, you know how celebrities sometimes order like those kind of cabs? Like because I
Tinted
just
windows.
into Windows, and I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna get murdered. Like because I have nothing, like I have no access to communication. And like I realized there are no streetlights in the US. That's like or like it's not populated with streetlights. It's besides in the city. And so like it was like a dark, like I was like, okay, this is a dark foresty area from the airport to the city called Raleigh. I don't know. I have nobody that I know of. And everything was great. The my cab driver, he was absolutely fabulous. And he actually asked me for a tip, and I was like, a
He
tip?
asked you for a tip.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, fine, let me just tip him. And I was just like, it's just expensive to be in the US. I was just like, oh, okay, it's
Wow.
just expensive to be in the US. I was such a I'm so stupid. And but I was just glad to be in one piece and to like finally arrive. After so many things.
That's a
And
big journey. That's a
it's a
long
big
way.
journey. It was a
Yeah,
28-hour journey,
goodness.
with the layovers included. And
That
my
is,
back was broken. I was basically
yeah,
like,
yes.
I could not sit anymore. I was like, it was difficult. And but I'm glad. I love Raleigh. It was just one of the best places for me.
So your MFA thesis was in fiction. What
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that. What kind of fiction? What does that look like? Was it a collection of short stories again?
Yes, it was a collection of short stories. And my fiction, I mean, currently my fiction is interested in exploring like um, intimate relationships and like complexities around intimate relationships owing to politics, gender, sexuality, um, and like ideas of family or marriage. I think I'm just really, really invested in these kind of things specifically. Obviously, these are broad categories and everyone's interested in it, but I think I'm more interested in, like, I was working on this project, which, like, I'm still figuring it out. I just realized my MFA was the start of that project, and like, I haven't fully figured out the vision for it necessarily. And I was interested in the lives of women in a particular building from the city I come from. Because I thought that the women in my life have been very different from the narratives that I hear around. Like I've never like the women in my life are like they were like just violent women. They would like beat you if you were wrong. They were never like, even if there would be violence that would fall on them, they would react to it. It wasn't like they were just quiet. So I thought that was such a strange thing from what I was hearing in the news, right? Like, oh, this woman was alone and then she was assaulted or something. But like, I was hearing stories about women who also fought, but still were struggling with these kind of issues. Like, it was not because they were helpless, it's because there's systems that are generated that um, work against them. So I was really invested, at least that was the starting, I'm saying, of like that kind of project. I was very interested in like how women are bad women, sometimes, they defy those odds. They are trying to get what they want, and they're not interested in kind of the framing of what it needs to be good. Um, they're trying to get a house, they're trying to get a husband, they're trying to get, maybe that piece of metal or whatever, and they're doing the best. And I was really like, oh, I'm really fascinated by that. And I've just like, I'm an effeminate guy, and but at the same time, I've always just been surrounded by women. So like, I just know women's stories more because like I've not been a lot. I haven't had like a bro kind of a space in my life, so I don't know what men talk about in many ways. I just like, okay, maybe they just talk about women. I don't know what's happening, but like, um, so it's like, but I know what women like. The kind of like I'm not saying women talk about profound stuff, they talk about whatever, makeup, having kids, or whatever, they talk about, and I get, that those are things that I grew up around. So I was interested in reflecting that in the stories that I was writing. But also, like, I think my biggest investment was bringing out a literature that incorporated both the language, the culture that I was from, but also expressed in the language that I'm learning, which is English, that I'm training in. So I think I'm trying to bridge to like cultural identities in me in that story, around where I grew up and where I'm probably going to be, which is like an anglophonic space, mostly. So I think I think that was the root behind that project. So I submitted that, um, for my MFA thesis, um, and it was exciting. But it's funny how I changed to like nonfiction now. So it's
What was the step to that? You finished with the MFA, and how did you decide on a PhD program? Was that the only option, or how did that happen?
how did I have no idea how it happened, but it's so and this is the thing about life. It really, like, and this is what you look for in writing as well. You would know this. When you write a story, you're always trying to surprise yourself more than anybody else. And life always surprises you in so many fundamental ways. And I'm saying that because I actually was like, I don't want to do a PhD. I was constantly telling people, I don't want to do a PhD. PhD is not for me. Being in school is not for me. And I was very vocal about it. And I was like, oh, I don't think so. It's for me. I'm such a bad student. I don't get good grades. I don't know how to do this, that. Um, but I think I have great interpersonal skills. So I have established relationship with professors, with peers, and I like learning from them. I really do. But I don't like the kind of the being in a classroom and doing the class stuff, like, discussion just to say something to get the grade, or like writing a paper just to get the grade. And I'm more interested in, okay, I want to like explore this concept, or this made me think about something completely different, which I think is related, but it's not exactly related. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I actually, in my first semester, I was in Elaine Orr's class, nonfiction class. And I was like, okay, I'm anyways going to be a fiction writer. Let me try other things like poetry or nonfiction, just to see, if I have skills or develop skills. We all need different kinds of skills as writers. And so in that, I wrote this essay called My Fistulous Body, which was eventually Roxane Gay's, uh, published by Roxane Gay in her newsletter called The Audacity. And it was about, I was going through a surgery, there was COVID, and I had like an HIV scare. So like the kind of my emotional world at that point of time. And this was right before I came to the US. So there was a lot of things happening, um, bodily and emotionally. And I think I wanted to express it. And people really liked that in the class. And like, and it was published eventually. And so that was one of like my first like big publication in a way, and it was in nonfiction. And then
Wow.
eventually I published another essay which was called Miseducation of Sissy. It's a platform in India called the Third Eye Portal, the Third Eye, sorry. And in it, I write about how my education has been a lot about being disciplined and about like doing things for success and status, but it never taught me how to love myself. And I actually write about some of my interactions in the Young Writers Workshop, actually.
Wow.
Yes, I do, because it's like I was trying to recount what it means to be both a student as well as a teacher, and how like the experience with those young students really changed my perspective on what it means to have an impact in an educational space, because you're not just teaching them how to read or write, you're really trying to teach them what life might look like in a way. And that, that's not always true, but I do think there are other ways you're teaching them how to be in the world. Because I remember in Young Writers, I had a student who had autism, and I was really reading a lot. I was talking to a lot of people about, like, I didn't know how to handle it at a certain level, but it made me. And I remember one of my friends telling me that, like, it's important for us to learn how to have an autistic student class because it teaches both the students as well as you what it means to be with neurodivergent people, and that learning is not equal. Like you need, like the teacher's task is challenging and therefore it needs to be given more credit because the teachers catering to different kinds of intelligences and not just one kind. And so I was really interested in this kind of concept of education as being just more about life and not just about getting the job or the like kind of the success that we want, because truly, like, as you know, David Foster Wallace says, like the test in This Is Water, that the test of our education is the patience that we have. If we have the patience during the time that we're struggling, and that is the test of our education, rather than all the other things that we really look at. It's not to lose your mind when you're waiting in line at the store. You know, that is your education in many ways, and I truly do believe that. And so that happened in Miseducation. I got multiple publications in nonfiction. So when I was at the end of my MFA, I was like, what's next? You know, I know I have to write the book and get it published, but like, what do I do then? And I was ready to go back to India. Weirdly enough, everyone's like, apply for the PhD. I think that's your ticket to staying here for 5 years, but also having time to work on your writing. And I was like, no, I want to have more money. I want to buy like perfume, and I don't want to struggle. I'm just stupid. So I think what happened was I I told myself that let me just apply. I applied to 5 places. I was like, I'm gonna apply to just 5 places, which I think are the best choices for me. It'll give me enough stipend to be happy and like not struggle, and it will also give me time to work. And I was genuinely ready to. I packed my bags actually. I was ready to go back to India. I'll find a work, and I will get the first book out, and then maybe I'll think about the PhD again if I want to. And then and then Bell, and there was Aruni Kashyap, who's one of my mentors, and everyone was like, apply for the PhD. Like, you know, what are you doing? You have your publications in place, you know. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And then, like, I'm not kidding you, Bill. Like, 1 week before the deadline, I was like, okay, let me finish this SOP. I just need to. And it was so funny. I was like, okay, this is a $90 application to USC. I don't know if I should waste my money for it. And then my friend was like, girl, if you're like, if that is the issue, let me give you that money. It
I'll
was just
pay
like,
for it. But yeah, that,
yeah, it was like one of the like, okay, fine. I cannot complain now. I just need to apply. I need to like submit the application. And she was like, she's one of my best friends now. And she said, like, if you get in, you can give me the money back. And then like, I was like, that's great because I'm never gonna get in. It was so crazy. And you know, um, I got waitlisted at University of Pittsburgh, and was I got accepted here, and like I couldn't again, like I was just like shocked, and I was like, how I, like this is not even something I was looking to. Um and and I think because of the publications and the kind of publications I had kind of although I'm working on like I pitched the education project as a bigger project because I'm really interested in thinking about how bell hooks or Nietzsche, they have thought about education and education of the body and not just the education of the mind. And so I pitched that as a project that I will work on in the PhD. And Maggie Nelson is my mentor, and she said, she really liked the project, and I thought, it had something in it. So I think it just came together, more than anything else. It was so random and it was just so unplanned, like a lot of the children in this world. but and but it works out. Like it kind of worked out. At least so far, it's worked out. So I'm really grateful for that $90 and all the harassing me with just apply. And again, like I was honestly ready to like pack my bags and go back to India. And I was like, you know, I'll find a writing job there. I'll get the book out, eventually in the next 2 years. But truly, this being here in the PhD, having the time to write and the kind of the faculty here, um, it's mesmerizing to be in this space.
it was meant to be. That was it.
Truly, who would know that Elaine's class would eventually, in the first semester of my MFA, would land me here.
Laid the foundation for your
Truly,
future right there.
truly. And that is, like as you said, you struggled, you had some speech impediment, and that e- eventually led you to knowing what it means to struggle with that, and you also helping people with working with their pronunciation and language and stuff like that. So like it builds, you don't
It
see it,
does. It
but then
does.
you kind of look back and like you was, oh, okay, it kind of makes sense.
That's why. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, out of the PhD program, you'll have a final project, and will that produce a book, or will you have something else as a book? Maybe a collection of the essays.
Yes, I'm currently working on the collection of essays around education, and that will potentially be my PhD thesis. Um, Things change, like everyone's telling me things change, projects change, but I would like to finish that as a project. I think there is some kind of momentum I'm interested in. It's making me think a lot about the world and my life. It's kind of like in a memoir, cultural criticism kind of a like hybrid genre kind of thing. So it's not just like I'm not just like recounting my life, but I'm recounting life in relation to what I've learned in three different education spaces, like in my bachelor's, in my master's, in my PhD, as a student, as a teacher, um, and as someone who people think is educated, and as someone who knows is like I have such a long way to go with my education. Like all these kind of polarities really draw me to that project, and I'm really hoping that I can finish it in the 5 years. I would finish it, refine it, and um, it would be at a good place. And if it doesn't happen, that was meant to be in a way. But like that is the goal. And yeah, I'm definitely excited about being in the nonfiction track because there's so much to um, just it's exciting to learn something um, that might be out of the wheelhouse in a way, which is funny for me to say because I'm doing the PhD in that. But I do have like an investment in fiction. Like narrative is my investment, and I bring a lot of narrative to my nonfiction work. So I think I will always be working on those browbeaten stories until they go out. But till then, I think and I'm also simultaneously working on that project on the education.
Great. Well, we look forward to learning more about your work in the coming years, and we'll definitely have you back on when that book gets published.
Oh
Talk
yeah,
about
I hope
that.
so.
So,
Your lips to God's ears.
thank you so much for joining me today, Mayookh.
Thank you so much for the
It's
invitation.
been a nice talk.